Welcome to KRQE's New Mexico News Insiders. Here's Gabrielle Burkhart and Chris McKee. Sponsored by New Mexico PBS.
So, Gabby, we've both lived here in Albuquerque for more than a decade now. I called us the Newsroom Senior Citizens a few episodes ago. I'll bring it back. But yeah, we know downtown, center point of the city. A lot of things have happened here, but I just wanted to ask you, over your time here, what have you noticed has maybe changed, the most change that you've seen, or maybe the least amount of change you've seen downtown? Does anything stand out?
Yeah, well, you used to live downtown. I remember when we worked nightside, we would go walk like to Bozy Bros and some of those downtown spots. I see those memes, like remember Bert's Tiki Lounge, and just the constant flow of businesses, I think, shifting and transitioning, but obviously there's some like key ones that have stayed the same, the Kiva, and I think downtown Central is a real good focus of that sort of sameness, but also changing a little bit.
Yeah, I think some people might disagree, but I do think there is a good amount of evidence to suggest that there is a lot going on downtown right now. And I say that it comes in both the form of planning efforts and I think also on-ground construction. And when it comes to sparking redevelopment downtown and in other parts of the city, there is someone in the city who has a big role, and he is joining us this week on the New Mexico News Insiders podcast here. Terry Brunner, the director of the City of Albuquerque's Metropolitan Redevelopment Agency. Terry, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, we are glad to have you here because, as I mentioned, I think you got your hands in a lot of different things going on, and we'll get into some of these, I think, over our conversation here today. But, your job seems to be where government intersects with private business, and it just so happens to be in the largest city in the state. But for those who don't know, what is the MRA, the Metropolitan Redevelopment Agency? Again, we know it's a city-run agency, but what does it do and what's your role?
Well, the Metropolitan Redevelopment Agency has been around since the 70s. So it's part of, it was part of urban renewal, like a craze that, in a sense, went throughout the nation trying to rehab cities. After the 1960s. And so we did the same in New Mexico, and Albuquerque started one. And we have 22 areas of the city that have been deemed as blighted and need of renewal since the 1970s. And we can go in and use special tools at the MRA to incentivize commercial private development. So we often are helping to build housing units in apartment complexes or retail things. I mean, the Hotel Andaluz was a MRA project from many years ago, and the Old Albuquerque High project is an MRA project from 20 years ago. So we've gone throughout the city. There's been lots of different methods they've used over the last, almost 50 years to really get at how do you take a vacant lot or a dilapidated building and bring it to a new use, and how does that use catalyze other good things to happen in that neighborhood. So our areas that we work in are typically up and down old areas of Central and 2nd and 4th Street and Broadway. So that's kind of what the MRA does. And it always takes little different iterations or forms depending on who the mayor is or the city council, and they might have different priorities. So our priority right now is a lot of housing, a lot of downtown stuff, a lot of Route 66 preparation for the Centennial. So those are some of the things that we're working on lately.
Yeah. And your bio says that you've been working with the city-run agency for about 3 years now. Before this, you ran a nonprofit working toward getting more funding for other nonprofits. Before that, it sounds like you worked for the USDA's Office of Rural Development under the Obama administration. So what led you to this current role, and what fuels you to do it?
So I really learned, I worked in politics and campaigns and for political officials in New Mexico for a long time, and then worked for the Obama campaign and got appointed at USDA to do rural development. And I was really fascinated by the breadth of what could be done by federal government to help rural communities. So we helped with multifamily apartment complexes and water systems and all these things where the government was incentivizing development to keep towns going. And that work is very similar to the work I do now, which is trying to figure out how do we bring people to the table that want to do something good in the community to advance the community. In this case, in my role now, it's around the private sector and bringing in developers and others to really try to assist Albuquerque. But where I'm at that nexus, as Chris said earlier, of like where the private sector meets government. And what can government do to set the table for the private sector so they want to make these investments? So a lot of my career in the last 10 years or so has been around understanding, like, what are the tools that make these things happen, these good things happen? And how do we do it better as government? How do we make sense of it all for a private sector development?
It almost seems like Albuquerque oftentimes gets highlighted as this city where there's only government and there's a lack of private developers. But I guess, you're on the ground, you're talking to people. Are there a lot of people that want to do private investment in Albuquerque that just maybe have a hard time figuring out how to do it?
There are. I mean, and we do, what's helped in my role a lot is to go around the country and see how other towns do it and understand a little perspective there. And we have a lot of people that want to, in a sense, get into the development game further or for the first time. And as a city, it's our best interest, in a sense, to lure them in a little bit and make it easier for them, not harder. So just last year, the mayor signed some rules into law that allow the permitting process to be faster if you're working in a metropolitan redevelopment area, because we don't want people to get discouraged because permits took a while or something. So we're always trying to figure out how to do it a little bit better and grow some of this development that we see around town.
Yeah. So when it comes to the work of the MRA, you touched on this a little bit in the beginning, but it's not entirely focused on downtown, even though we sort of started the conversation there. There's a lot of work that MRA does downtown, but just to kind of ask, or to really set the table here, the MRA does put its focus into these special zones called Metropolitan Redevelopment Areas. You mentioned, I think there's 22 of them now here at this point. And they are all over the place. I know there's one like at 12th and Candelaria area. There's, South Broadway, the East Downtown area.
Mm-hmm.
They're described as these sort of unique plans helping spur reinvestment by incentivizing development and updating infrastructure. If you look at the list of MRAs out there, some of them are newer. Some of them are pretty old, even they go back to, I think, as you mentioned, like 70s, 80s. Once an MRA is made, it doesn't ever fall off the table, right? Or it would have to sort of probably take an act of city council to eliminate it, right? Do you just find that you're sort of building upon the stack of MRAs, but and do some of those fall by the wayside after years go by?
Yeah, they do, and we've really looked at this a lot lately. So these plans are very old, or the goals that we had for a particular area are very old, and we need to revisit those plans. So we've talked about sunsetting some of them, revisiting them. 12th and Candelaria is a great example. I live by there. That plan it's over 20 years old, and they've now come around to the point where they need a new plan to just get at the stuff they did in the first plan. So we need to be better about that. And also neighborhoods change and communities change and their priorities change. So we would love it if we had the resources over time to do updates every few years. Downtown is a great example too. Our last plan downtown was in the early 2000s, and we're just getting to redoing it now, where we probably needed one about 10 years ago. And so that is important. And it also, when we are now kind of looking at a little bit more on the commercial side, what we can do in the 21st century, we need to stay current with the times and the economic conditions too.
I'm curious your perspective when you consider positives and negatives about downtown Albuquerque. How do you see it? What has it got? What's it missing?
So I think everybody agrees now, and back when we did our first plan there in the early 2000s, that the bones, in a sense, are good. We have a lot of elements that any downtown's going to have and bring to the table. We have a convention center. We have our city hall offices there. We have a historic Route 66 running through town. Those are consistent. We've had those for a while. And it's always been a question of what we're doing to build on that activity. And downtowns change a lot. They changed a lot during COVID. For instance, less people now are working downtown than they used to. But some of those base elements are still there. And I think every mayor comes along and every mayoral administration trying to figure out, how do you build on this a little bit? Like, what's the new thing that you can do to bring more sustainability long-term to downtown? The other thing about downtowns that's interesting is you talk to downtown organizations across the city. Everybody that comes into a town like Albuquerque wonders about downtown. It's the first place you think about visiting. And how do we pivot off of that and make something out of it, that type of thing. So I think the base elements we have downtown in that palette is something to work with. And it's up to every mayor and his administration or their administration to figure out how they're going to build on that.
We'll be right back with more of the New Mexico News Insiders.
Hi, I'm Logan Rader, host of New Mexico Living. New Mexico News Insiders is sponsored by New Mexico PBS.
If you like New Mexico News Insiders, learn more about New Mexico in Focus, a weekly hour-long show analyzing decisions impacting New Mexico statewide. Stream it anytime, anywhere. Visit nmpbs.org and follow them on all social media platforms.
Now back to New Mexico News Insiders.
So I mentioned off the top, I think there is kind of a lot going on downtown. If I'm thinking about that lot, there are some connections here with the MRA, with some of the projects we've seen, the street projects, putting bike lanes on Central towards working for a solution. I know this is a newer idea to redevelop areas around Robinson Park. That's the area where the growers market happens downtown between like April and November, I think it is in there. Then you've got some newer redevelopments there. Ex Novo is an example of a brewery that turned from the old Firestone Station. Then you've got the Arrive Hotel that used to be the Hotel Blue, closed for a number of years, remodeled, now reopened. There's an idea of a new performing arts center downtown, maybe even a UNM downtown campus. Those are just some scratching the surface, though, of projects. I did want to jump into one of the big ones, and I see you've even got a sticker on your phone about it. This is about the rail trail. It's an active project right now for the city, multi-million-dollar idea. But for those who don't know, what is the rail trail? How do you describe it?
Yeah, so the rail trail is a 7-mile loop around downtown that connects to the Bosque Trail that will allow bicyclists and pedestrians to really walk that area and connect a bunch of neighborhoods together and provide an amenity that's not only recreational, but it's a tourist attraction and it's something more to do in Albuquerque. And we love this idea, and it's been around, as the mayor likes to say, for about 35 years to reuse sections of old rail as a place where people can walk and recreate. And in working on this rail trail, the mayor and I have both probably visited about 10 trails around the country where these are big economic catalysts for downtown. And I think we limit ourselves a lot of times when we think about trails, and we think about the Bosque Trail, where you got a little bit of blacktop, you got some rocks, some native vegetation, and that's a trail. But these trails we see around the country are more interactive. They're taking you from commercial location to commercial location, or connecting community centers, or giving you a history of the neighborhood that you're in. And they're really more of an amenity, like a tourist attraction kind of thing that people will visit from around the state. So that's our vision around this trail. We're really excited about it, and we're underway in a couple sections. So
you mentioned the comparison when you can visualize the Bosque Trail, like you've got dirt, a blacktop. Can you give us a vision, like describe for our listeners, what does it look like?
Yeah, so if you've ever been to the Santa Fe rail yards, this is something like that, where when you come to the trail, there's actually landscaping on the side of it. Maybe the sidewalk lights up. Maybe there's murals on the sidewalk. There's overhead lighting. There's call boxes for security. There's QR codes on signs where you can, click on those and get some historical information of the area. And the pavement is smooth and maintained. So it's a little different. And also, I think one thing we talk a lot about is there's lots of access to that trail. So one thing we learned from trails around the country is you want to have, you just never have enough access points. You want to walk out the back of your housing development right onto that trail. And that's not something you do on the Bosque Trail. That's a little bit more like a nature trail in some ways, because you're going, you're commuting or you're parking and then walking in towards it. This is much more of an urban trail in the sense of the word in where we're looking at on the rail trail.
Yeah. And I understand the original idea was just to make sort of a north-south trail along the track downtown. That's obviously turned into a big 7-mile loop now through several neighborhoods. How has this concept changed over the years? How did it grow?
Yeah, I think it grew in the sense of how you can link these different areas. So like you said, it was just north-south on that typical rail line where you see Amtrak and Burlington Northern doing their rail shipping. And I think there was a trolley car envisioned for the side of that. And then it turned into a walkway. And then we thought, and I think the mayor took the lead on this, is, well, wait, how do you connect it to like the rail yards and the National Hispanic Cultural Center and the Bosque and these other different elements in Old Town? Like right now, it's hard to walk from Old Town to the Bosque Trail. It's not an easy path. So it's just logical. You know, you want to build up a nicer connector that takes you from Old Town to the Biopark to the Bosque Trail. Like that's common sense. And we're just executing on some of that, I think, and making these linkages a little clearer. So, you know, I love the idea that you could take your kid in a stroller over to the Biopark and then just walk right over to Old Town, and it's a really easy path. Like that's a great idea, I think.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a lot of excitement around it, and you know, you started with the idea that kind of just between almost like Lomas and Central, that it would be this like north-south path, but now linking all of these neighborhoods and making easier connections does seem really exciting. On the other hand, you know, some are going to argue, oh, your idea is just getting bigger, your price tag's getting bigger. Why is this worth the investment? So what is the bottom line on this project? Why is it something that the Keller administration really has like sunk its teeth into?
So, I mean, it checks so many boxes of things we want to see in Albuquerque. I mean, just the entertainment amenity side of it is one, and the tourist attraction is one. So when you get a tourist attraction, like for instance at Central on the railroad tracks, we have a brand new hotel on Broadway and Central, which is doing really well. And we want those tourists that stay there to cross in an easy way into downtown, not have to go through a nasty underpass, and go eat at our restaurants and go shop at our stores. Like that's an economic equation that we want to see happen. So that tourist idea is great. The other thing is from the recreation side and the connectivity side. If we just got done doing a massive investment in Wells Park, there's a huge playground there now. And Wells Park Community Center is going to be a great attraction. But we want that kid who goes to this community center on his bike to access the trail and ride home and get that connectivity going. So that's not these isolated city infrastructure investments that we have, that they're connected. And then the last thing is, what we know from other trails around the country is people want to have their apartment next to the trail, and they want to have their pizza parlor next to the trail. So in Wells Park, you just have a random assortment of different businesses that are kind of glomming together because they're breweries or whatever, and they like to be near each other. But imagine if you had housing complexes in there and you had people walking around. It changes the nature of these neighborhoods in a positive way. So we're really hopeful that this incentivizes private development through Wells Park, into Borellis, around Old Town, in downtown, and young people want to be by that trail. And that would be amazing. And you don't have a housing development in isolation like we sometimes have in this town, and there's nothing around it. We want all this stuff connected, and that helps the economy in our city.
So while the project is underway, it doesn't sound like all the funding is there to finish it, right? The rail trail. There might be some slightly newer numbers, but the city's website right now outlines around $40 million that's been secured, but the project could cost anywhere from $60 to $90 million in the end. Will it get done, you think?
Well, we hope so. So the way we're strategizing on this is we're going to develop particularly important sections first, and those will be really the argument for future funding. Perhaps, you know, a future mayor will want to do a bond to complete this project, or the federal government will want to invest more. I mean, right now we have about, for every city dollar we put in, about $4 of outside investment by the feds and the state. And we hope to continue with that. But, you know, the Sawmill section, which will be from Teague Park to Sawmill Market and is under construction now, we think is, I think that will have all the bells and whistles. And when people walk on that trail, people from Albuquerque, they're going to say, yeah, we want more of this. This is really cool. Same with Central Crossing. When they see the ramps that we build at Central and that crossing has become safer and you're up on top of the railroad tracks, seeing new views of Albuquerque and maybe walking through a really cool sculpture of a tumbleweed or whatever, that people are going to say, I like this. Please, politicians and deciders in Albuquerque, let's do more of it. And that's what we want to see.
When do you think this can get done? Obviously, the funding is always the big question mark here, and it sounds like those numbers are still up to date there, about $40 million secured, 60 to 90 cost. But yeah, when do you think this can get done?
I think realistically, it's 2028, 2029 if we were fully funded and able to just keep going. We have accumulated all the property we need to make the trail happen, so we have the pathway figured out. And now it's just a question of building it out. And I think we'll have some exciting news soon on a portion by the biopark. We've got a really cool lot that we've acquired near Old Town that will be part of this. But I think the 28, 29 timeframe is probably realistic.
One of the other big concepts outlined for downtown is this new visioning document. Something called Downtown 2050 is basically a 25-year plan outlining the projects that the city should pursue downtown. There's a lot to it. We can link to it in our show notes if anyone wants to actually read through it and see. But just to hit two of the high notes from that, it sounds like better downtown parking and more shade are among two of the top ideas to just make downtown better. Is that right?
That's right. So those are some of the creative ideas in there, along with creating nodes, centers of activity. So you referenced earlier Hotel Arrive and Ex Novo, which are extremely popular. The way I think about it is, okay, if I've got those two things and they're popular and they're happening, how do I have that happen across the street? So when you're sitting at Arrive Hotel, you see a restaurant across the street and say, I want to go there next week. So how do we build on these different nodes of activity that are happening? Like if we are able to drag some UNM programs downtown near the convention center, what other stuff do we build around it? So that's kind of a more targeted strategy we outline in that report, rather than kind of a scattershot thing that we're doing right now, where it's just like, okay, if you've got an opportunity to put a business over there, great, and then do one over there, great. But we want to kind of have more of a strategic plan, and that's what's outlined in the report.
Yeah. Why is downtown Albuquerque's parking situation considered so bad? Is it because many garages are privately owned? Is it a messaging problem?
It's all of that and more. So we have a combination of private parking lots, structures, and we have public structures where you have parking garages. And then we have a lot of lots that are just what we call surface level parking. And then we have on-street parking. But what we don't have that a lot of cities have is a more dynamic parking situation. So if you're driving in from the Heights into downtown, there's a sign that tells you, here's where all the parking is, or how many spaces are available, or how you can use your phone to get your parking. Like, those are advancements that we haven't really ever nailed down. And our new parking plan outlines some of that. And I think it will outline, it's not released yet, but outline some of that, and also get to the reality of parking. Parking is like, I've discovered a very controversial topic in Albuquerque.
Yeah,
and either there's too much
totally
or
agree.
There's too little. And you're in either camp. It's like you're red chili or you're green chili, but not both or whatever. So so we're going to try to tell the truth about how many spots are actually around, how many of the garages are actually full, and try to, in a sense, get the straight talk on parking going, and give people the good information so that they feel like when they come downtown, it's all sorted out and they can figure it out.
Yeah, I've seen garages where you enter and there's a digital sign that tells you 5 spaces left or lot full. Don't even try, that kind of stuff.
It just feels like I've lived here for 12 years, and I came from a small town in Oregon. I'd often go up to Portland, which has had a pretty vibrant downtown and a lot of parking garages, and I've just never felt quite the feeling I have felt here in Albuquerque about parking, that it is such a polarizing issue, I think, which you hit on the head here. We're in a place where there is so much of it actually, if you really look around. So
yeah, and it's very much in transition. I mean, it's funny in our town, like, you know, people still want to drive downtown and park right in front of their restaurant,
right?
And they get frustrated if they can't.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit of growing pains. We're a big city now. We have big city issues to deal with. We have a lot of people coming downtown, and so I think we also have to condition ourselves to understand that, like, it's not, parking is not the way it was 40 years ago in Albuquerque. It's changed a lot. So we're trying to get with the times and update how we look at parking.
We'll be right back with more on New Mexico News Insiders.
Hi, I'm Monica Wicki, host of New Mexico Living. This episode of New Mexico News Insiders is sponsored by New Mexico PBS. If you enjoy New Mexico News Insiders, check out New Mexico in Focus, a great source for insights about what's happening in our state. Catch their podcast and videos at nmpbs.org or stream it anytime, anywhere on the free PBS app. Now, let's continue to New Mexico News Insiders.
What is the lowest hanging fruit you feel like, whether that's an element of that downtown 2050 plan or something else, but what is the lowest hanging fruit you feel like to help alleviate an issue downtown or to fix things?
I'll try to narrow it down to a couple, but
Okay.
but one of them that was mentioned before is beautification. I mean, beautification is easy. We can put up so many murals if we want to. We can do garbage cans that are brand new. We can stripe lanes. We just put a mural on Central on the sidewalk, or on the street, Route 66 mural. Like, we can do that stuff pretty well. We do a great job with trees in downtown. The question is, can we do more? Like, every tree downtown is monitored digitally, remotely, on its watering and things. Like, we do some good stuff, and we can build on that relatively cheaply and easily. So those beautification ideas, I think, are home runs. You kind of always can do more, and they're easy. The second one that is really the key to downtown, that I think is not as hard as we think it is to get more people down there. The issues that we have that are perceived as negative issues are very much there because there's no one around. So you tend to look at the bad thing, but if there were more people walking around, you might not look at it as much. So getting bodies downtown is really the key to everything. That changes the dynamic so much. But when you're the only person at Thursday at 3 p.m. walking down a street downtown, it feels lonely and weird and not that great. So getting those bodies downtown is a key thing for us.
I want to pivot to another big downtown issue, and something that we should note isn't entirely your purview, but it is something that the city may have a nexus with if there is enough business support. This is the idea of creating a new business improvement district, or a BID, which would basically help fund services, including bolstered cleaning crews and security, among other potential things it could fund. The unique thing, without getting into all of what a bid does, but the unique thing about these is that they need a majority of the businesses to sign on in a proposed area. And essentially the businesses are signing on to tax themselves for a specialty series of services, which again, would be paid by the businesses. What is the city's potential role in this, though? If a BID happens, which as we're recording this here, I know there's a signature gathering effort happening now amongst, again, the private property owners. If this happens, what is the city's potential role in this?
So our role is in as a supporter, and we pay into the bid. So we own properties downtown, left and right, and we would probably be one of the largest property owners. And so under this situation, what happens is you get a fee assessed based on your square footage or your linear footage on the street, and you pay into a pot of money to support this business improvement district. It's very common. This is what a lot of downtowns do across the country. I've been to actually the National Association of these business improvement districts, and it's really fun to hear about all the different things you can do with it. But it's basically a business support organization. And the city is collecting the fee and giving it back to the organization, and then they decide how to spend it. But we assume it means we team up on stuff. So we can team up on security, or we can team up on special parking districts, or a tourism campaign to draw people into the business improvement district. There's things that we can do related to crime that are unique. We can give them authority to police their own sidewalks, which some of them have asked to do. So there's a lot of creative good stuff, but really what it is like you're creating a mutual support organization where the men's hat shop is supporting Anodyne, the bar, which is supporting the other group, and they're all going in on things together. So just as an example, one of those shops I mentioned spends more than $2,000 a month on security. If they teamed up with everybody else on the block, they'd spend a lot more. So it's that kind of spirit of cooperation that we're trying to assist with and get these business owners to unite and create a really nice environment where we're problem solving together and promoting each other.
Do you get the sense now that there is enough support from those small businesses to buy into something like a business improvement district?
Yeah, we're very optimistic there is. We are looking though as the city, we don't want to tell businesses what to do. So we're really looking for them to get organized, get this kind of spirit of cooperation going, and we lend a support role. Where this has gone south in the past in Albuquerque is where the city is too heavy-handed, or they think we're going to do it all. We don't want to do that. The mayor's been clear. Get us out of the picture. You can kind of police your own area, do your own stuff, and we'll be supportive, but we don't want to tell you what to do. And that's a theme we hear back from businesses, which is get out of our way, city. So this is a way that we're getting out of the way and letting them determine their own future, which I think is a positive thing.
Yeah. Outside of downtown, we mentioned, there's other MRAs. There's a stretch of Manal just east of I-25, north of I-40 that's turned into a metro redevelopment area. Is it fair to say that the city takes the lead on prioritizing MRA investment, or does the plan really get led by the business community with these special areas? Where is the MRA's big focus in the city?
It's a little bit of both in that particular area. I mean, it's challenging. It's a smaller MRA for us. It just goes from the freeway over to the diversion canal in Manal and then a couple blocks back on either side. But this was an area that was really popular prior to the Big I expansion. You had a lot of hotels operating, and it's kind of gone downhill in some ways since then. So we will take the lead in offering up our incentives, like property tax abatement for development, maybe grants to improve storefronts, and try to bring these business owners to the table. But then we also get a lot of cold calls. We get a lot of people calling in from other states saying, I want to buy that hotel on that corner. What can you do to help me with that? So those are the different types of roles we play. Development is really tricky, though. So you have a lot of speculation going on in that area because maybe properties are cheap or run down. And so we just try to, again, offer this support role, try to help out-of-state developers in particular try to figure it out. But then also maybe guide some public investments like a new streetscape plan or new signage or new bus stops to maybe, put a better face on the area and attract more interest. But those are the type of things we do in an MRA like that.
Well, it does sound like, again, quite a bit of different projects are coming across your table here. Is there anything else that you would want people to know about what the MRA does or what your priorities are right now that we didn't talk about?
Well, I think there's a couple things. Like we've been taking an interest in real estate the last couple of years in buying and selling properties. So along Central, we've made a couple key investments where we bought vacant lots that were held by families for 30 or 40 years with nothing on them. And, we encourage anybody who wants to sell their lot to call us. And then the other thing we're doing is we ran an inventory of all the city properties, and we're looking at whether or not they're commercially viable. Can they be put into use for housing or something like that? So I think you'll see in the next year, we're going to offer up more and more city lots and try to get people to build stuff on them, because you drive up and down Central or on 4th Street or on Broadway and you see those vacant lots. They're kind of like missing teeth, and we're trying to fill them in. And we're going to be more aggressive about that in the next year or so.
Yeah. Well, that's great to hear, because I think that is, where people often see the problems that happen in the city are those vacant lots, and they've been that way for decades. And so incentivizing, trying to do something different, I think is something that I would venture to say almost everybody can get on board with. So
yeah, not as controversial as the parking situation.
We can go on.
Yeah.
Let's do an episode on parking.
Yeah, we can. Well, Terry, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. It's been fun.
Thank you. Thanks again to Terry Brunner, the director of the city's Metropolitan Redevelopment Agency, for what we hope is a wide-ranging conversation about things going on development-wise across Albuquerque and mainly downtown.
Yeah, it's good to get a visual of like what the rail trail is all about, because you hear it being tossed around in conversation a lot. We know it's a big priority of the Keller administration. It'll be interesting to see some of these projects take shape.
Yeah, that sawmill section and also the downtown section, as Terry mentioned, are the ones that are sort of being built up right now. So we shall see. If you have an idea for a podcast or conversation you'd like to see here on Insiders, let us know. I'm at chris.mckee@krqe.com, also at Chris McKee TV.
And I'm Gabrielle.Burkhart at krqe.com via email and gburknm on social media. Thanks for listening and watching.